All right, everybody. It is 5 o'clock Central Time. Thank you for joining me, everybody, on your Wednesday evening. I am Amber Whitney with Archer Review, one of our science educators here at Archer. And tonight, you guys are here to get a good test prep for the anatomy and physiology portion of your exam. And while we wait for everybody to hop on, whether it's Zoom, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, I'll just go ahead and talk with you guys about all that we offer you here at Archer Review and also show you some of those awesome features if you go ahead and sign up with us while we wait for, again, more people to hop on and get started. So here is one screenshot of all of the different features that we offer everybody here at Archer Review. So let's just talk about them quick before we begin. First and foremost, the question bank. This will be included in the free demo that you are able to sign up for. So if you sign up for the free demo, you get 24 hours from the moment you sign up. You get access to our amazing question bank. And as you see there, we have over 2,000 questions and rationales to help prepare you for your exam. But not only will you get access to the question bank in our demo, you will also have access to our on-demand videos. So our on-demand videos include timestamps, they include notes, they include cheat sheets. So let's go ahead and take a look at what all that looks like. What are these on-demand videos? What are these timestamps? So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this presentation quick, and I'll show you how to log in and get to all these goodies that we are talking about. And then I'll come back to this screen here, and you guys will be able to scan QR codes to take you directly to these portions, hopefully, if you're interested. So when you go to, a new tab, just type in www.archerreview.com, go ahead and sign up for a student account, and this is where it would take you. So this is known as the student dashboard. Now, if you sign up for that 24-hour free demo, I said you would have access to our QBank. So in our QBank, you've got over 2,000 questions, like I said, and it keeps track of the questions that you get right, the questions that you get incorrect, how many questions have you gone through out of the total. And what's really cool is that it allows you to go back through some of those questions that you missed and really focus in on the why you missed them using our rationales that we've developed, and then to have that opportunity to redo those questions. So we are set up to keep track of all of that for you to help you prepare. But the other awesome feature you will get access to in our demo here are the on-demand videos. So our on-demand videos are broken down by English, reading, math, and science, all major portions of common entrance level exams, including the TEAS. So let's say tonight in anatomy, with our test prep that we're going to have here in the next hour, let's say you really do a good job of keeping track of the topics you're really good at, and you keep track of the topics that, like I forgot about that content. Maybe I need to do a deeper dive into those areas. So when you click into science, you'll see that we've got 4 major categories: A&P, biology, and some physical, chemistry, and scientific reasoning. Now I said tonight we're doing A&P, so let's just use that for our example. Click into A&P and it breaks it down even farther for you. So let's say, we go through general terms in anatomy, you got that, no problem. But maybe the respiratory, there's some things in there that you want to touch up on. Notice how each respiratory system section has its own topic that you can go into. So within the respiratory system, let's say, basic structure and function, you've got down. You don't need to listen to that part of the video. Time is precious when you're studying and have a job and all the things. So you don't need to spend time maybe on structure and function. Maybe it's more the gas exchange that you just need a refresher on. So you can click gas exchange and it will take you directly to that spot in the video. Now,
Mark, a
videos
60-year-old man,
gonna go ahead. That's actually my voice. I recorded this one. You guys can hear the audio, but you're not able to see the actual video on your end. That's just for security and privacy reasons. So just make sure that when you go in and actually sign up for the demo, that you will be able to see that entire video screen, our notes that go with it, so on. But then also in the on-demand videos, we mentioned that you'll have a set of notes and you will have a beautifully designed cheat sheet that goes with it. So notes is going to be, all the details covered in this lecture, but cheat sheets simplifies it. It gives you the essential takeaways, so to speak, from that particular video along with visuals to go with it. So our on-demand videos and our Q bank together are just some of those essential pieces to help you be successful to pass your exams. Okay. So, I have a question here. I just wanted to answer this for most people. How to start those questions. So back here on that dashboard under Q bank, you can go ahead and click Create Test. And under create test, you can do all the questions you haven't covered already. You can give yourself a testing time limit so that you can really hone in and make that same testing environment similar to what you would have for whatever exam that you are taking. And then you would click next. And then notice here, again, here at Archer Review, we try really hard to make your needs individualized and to make sure that we cater to those individual needs. So again, if you don't need to do any math questions, you feel like a rock star, maybe you just want to focus on English tonight, you can click those specific areas and then click next. And then again, it'll choose lessons within those. So let's say I highlighted these two areas for English. I want to focus on spelling and punctuation. So then you would click Create Test, and it generates that for you. And there's like a similar setup that you would have when taking your TEAS exam. So hopefully that helps you answer your question to those who asked about how to go ahead and start those questions. Okay, so I'm going to get back out of this. Let's go back to our slides. Maybe. All right, there we go. So there's the QR code to get to the question bank. Here's the QR code to get to on-demand videos. And remember, we are offering a free demo, 24 hours. You have access to these two essential pieces. But let's say you definitely want more than that. After 24 hours, you realize this is a wonderful product for you that you want to keep engaging with to help you prepare. So what else would be included then? You would have access to tutoring if you sign up for a couple of packages here at Archer. So we've got 3 lovely tutors in the English and reading and the science and the math, and I'll talk about those on a separate slide. But a couple of other QR codes here. So tonight it's a live free webinar, of course. If you want to get access to our other live webinars that are happening, whether it's tomorrow or next week or next month, go ahead and scan this QR code to see everything that is offered, add them to your calendar, be sure to show up. And if you happen to miss one, or you're just joining us for the first time tonight and you had no idea that we offer these free live webinars and you want to go back and see what else has been covered. So you can go to our rewatch webinar, which just takes you to our previously recorded webinar libraries. And you can go back and rewatch those at your own pace even. Now, these bottom 2 QR codes are going to give you access to 2 different packages that we offer at Archer Review. And I'm actually going to toggle my slides here so you can see the difference between the 2. So the Sure Pass option gives you access to QBank and on-demand videos. So this is beyond that 24-hour free demo period. You want to keep at that beyond the 24 hours, go ahead and sign up for Sure Pass. But there's another package that's going to help save you money in the long run, guys. And this is our Sure Pass Pro option. This is going to include that essential question bank, that essential on-demand video, but you're also going to get 1 hour of tutoring included with that package. And again, I said this is going to save you money, but like how? So let's say you decide to do Sure Pass now. You get the Q Bank, you get the on-demand video, and you get into it, and your test is coming up, and you would just love a tutor session on, one of those areas that you feel weakest in. You'd have to pay for tutoring separate. Whereas Sure Pass Pro, you get that 1 hour built in with it, and it's going to save you a little bit of cash instead of having to pay for that tutor option down the road. All right. So that's the major difference between SurePass and SurePass Pro. And again, here are those QR codes to those two packages. And then one more here before we get started. This is just our feedback survey. So just for you guys to have the opportunity to help us improve, we are here to serve you. So we are all educators, and we care deeply about the students and the people that we provide services for. So please, let's go ahead and scan this QR code. Be honest with us. What did you love? What helped you? And then also give us constructive criticism as well. What are some things that you would like to see us do differently or better, so to speak? We greatly appreciate all of that feedback. So make sure that you just scan this now and early so you don't forget at the end of this webinar. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's going to run for about an hour long, and so about 6 o'clock, I'll try to wrap us up. Keep in mind, this webinar, it is free. It is surface level knowledge, you guys, all right? I'm just going to trigger some recent studying. I'm going to trigger some maybe old learning, and this is a wonderful way for you to recognize what are you good at, and what do you need more to spend more time in? What content areas do you really need to develop? So this is surface level, and it's hopefully going to get done around 6 o'clock. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's start with general knowledge first. So this is going to be the need for all healthcare professionals to speak this common language. So basic general knowledge in anatomy is going to include understanding anatomical position, anatomical planes, and all directional terms. And again, this is for all professionals to have that common language, whether it's in the OR and you guys are working on a patient and there's people all around the patient on different sides. So, we can't use things like right or left or up or down. We have to use very specific terms so that we understand what that means from all directions and orientations. And then same thing when you're typing up a medical report, for example. We don't want to leave to question what we mean by direction. So we have the same common language. So what does that language look like? First, it's all framed around anatomical position. Remember, anatomical position is just standard posture, and that includes standing upright, feet together and parallel. Your arms are rested at your sides, but your palms are facing forward. So notice how that thumb is away from your body. Your palms are facing forward, and that head is directed straight ahead. Keep in mind, left and right are always from the patient's perspective, not from your perspective, but it's the patient's right side of the body, the patient's left side of the body. And again, this is to ensure that medical professionals and researchers can all communicate findings and procedures accurately for best patient care and without confusion. So the basic directional terms, know these like the back of your hand, you guys. Anterior or ventral, these are synonymous terms, and they mean the front of the body. So here's that anterior view, the front of the body, as opposed to posterior or dorsal. This is the back of the body. And to help you remember that, I think of that term dorsal like a dorsal fin on a dolphin, right? It's that back side of the dolphin's body. It's the fin that pops up and out of the water that you see to know, that there's a dolphin swimming in the waters next to you. So that's the back part of the body. Superior and cranial are interchangeable, and this means toward the head, as opposed to inferior or caudal. This is toward the feet. Medial is going to mean towards the middle of the body, towards that midline. So medial, middle, medial, middle. And then lateral is the opposite. This is moving away from the midline of the patient's body. Proximal means closer to the point of attachment. So notice on this patient's right arm here, this shoulder joint is proximal as opposed to the wrist, the phalanges, right? The wrist. This is distal because this is distant. It's farther away from the point of attachment. So proximal is closer to the point, and then distal is distant, away from the point of attachment. Moving into anatomical planes, your body can be divided in three major ways here. So we've got transverse. The transverse plane separates the upper half from the patient's lower half. The frontal plane separates the person's front of the body as opposed to the patient's back of the body. So frontal, front, and then that leaves you then with the back. And finally, sagittal, which separates the patient's left from the patient's right side of their body. So transverse, frontal, and sagittal. And then there's the anatomical regions, and they are numerous, you guys. So we have some visuals here broken into some major anatomical regions of the body. So we've got head regions, we've got neck regions, upper limbs, torso, in the pelvis, and lower limbs. And notice how many names that we have under all of these subdivisions of the patient's body. They are numerous, and honestly, it's just a whole lot of memorization. So I'm not going to cover all of these terms in this webinar. They have whole entire classes for this called medical terminology, where you take all of these words for anatomical regions and study them nonstop. But I just want you to be aware of them, that they can be referred to because we use these terms when we want to refer to muscles or arteries, for example. So knowing these anatomical regions is going to help you identify really quickly what muscle group are we referring to, or what is that artery, where is it located in the body. If you can remember the anatomical regions, that's going to give you clues as to the location. All right, that wraps up general knowledge. Let's move into the respiratory system. Why do we have a respiratory system? And the answer for this is for gas exchange, all right? A lot of my students that I teach every day would say, Mrs. Whitney, it's for breathing. But breathing is just how we get oxygen in and how we get carbon dioxide out of the body. But the whole purpose for the respiratory system is to actually get those gases exchanged. Breathing is just the way in which you bring them in and bring them out. But of course, it's a lot more detailed than that. So let's cover it. I want you guys to take a big, deep breath in with me now and just feel the air fill the different parts of your body as it works its way down to the lungs itself. So as soon as you take that breath in, that air enters your upper respiratory tract. And this is going to include the two major structures, the pharynx and the larynx. The pharynx is the back of that throat. So I've got 3 arrows here, and I've got 3 because there are subdivisions to the pharynx. So again, another shout out to our on-demand videos. We would go into more detail about those subdivisions. Right now, for our free webinar, we keep it simple. All right. So in the back of that throat is that pharynx. And this allows air from the nose and your mouth to eventually pass and get down into the lungs. But it doesn't just go pharynx, lungs, right? There's a whole transportation system. So let's keep going. After pharynx, that air is going to move down into the larynx, still a part of that upper respiratory tract. The larynx helps to keep food and drink out of the trachea, all right? It's like a gateway system. It's going to make sure that the air in the food doesn't go down into the trachea because we don't want air, we want air. We don't want food and drink to get down into that lung. So we want to make sure only air gets there, and the larynx is a gatekeeper to help make sure that we separate those things. After the larynx, then you move down into the trachea. Now you're getting into the lower respiratory tract. The trachea is also known as your windpipe. It is a cartilage tube, simply just for air to travel to eventually get down into the lungs. At the base of that trachea, you see two subdivisions here. These are called bronchi. All right, so the bronchi is going to break off from the trachea and it's going to go to the patient's left and the patient's right. So it's just distributing that air from the patient's left to the patient's right side until that air leaves the bronchi and is delivered into the bronchioles. So this is the smaller transportation tubes that you see here in the lung tissue. Bronchioles' job is to deliver the air to the alveoli. That's our last stop on this pathway. Alveoli, and I've zoomed in on those alveoli here. This is the site for gas exchange. Here is where gas exchange happens in the alveoli. Everything else leading up to the alveoli, the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, is simply just a transportation system for getting that air to the alveoli. So these alveoli must be pretty darn important then, and they are. Alveoli are structured like tiny little clusters of grapes. Why? It maximizes surface area, all right, as opposed to this entire tissue being one unified mass. Instead, they're smaller clusters that have more exposure to the elements around it. Again, maximizing surface area. Our bodies are efficient and we want to be efficient with gas exchange. So this allows for passive diffusion. So this means that areas of highly concentrated gases outside will diffuse into, and then exchanging gases that are heavily present inside the alveoli, and then moving from a high to low concentration outside of the alveoli. That means gas exchange is occurring here because of passive diffusion. Things able to move from a high to a low concentration moving in and moving from a high to a low concentration moving out. We have gas exchange. So I want to give some visuals to that concept of diffusion and concentrations. So to be clear, within your alveoli here, so here's one cluster, right? And it's surrounded by blood, a capillary to be exact. So this blood capillary is going to deliver gases, right? So the gas exchange is going to occur between the alveoli and the blood itself. Now, I asked you to take a big deep breath in. Well, what you just brought in, the major gas, is oxygen. So inside your alveoli here, this cluster is full of oxygen. It's highly concentrated as soon as you took that big breath. It's highly concentrated right here in your alveolus. And in the blood capillaries surrounding it, there's not as much oxygen. So oxygen naturally diffuses from an area where it's highly concentrated inside your lung tissue right now, and it diffuses without using any energy into your blood capillary to get that blood rich in oxygen once more so it can be delivered to the rest of the body. But again, this is gas exchange. So if the body is being given oxygen, well, what's the body giving up? And that is carbon dioxide. We want to make sure that we get carbon dioxide out of our blood and back into our lungs, because if we don't, that can lead to acidic blood, for example, and throw the body out of homeostasis. So again, passive diffusion is the key here. Carbon dioxide is being created by all cells in the body from cellular respiration, and it's got to get out. So the blood comes to the rescue here. It takes that carbon dioxide from the cells in the body and it brings it back and it surrounds that tissue, the alveoli and the lungs. And because that carbon dioxide is highly concentrated in the blood and not as high concentrated in the lung, it naturally leaves the blood and it diffuses into the lung so that you can finally exhale and get that carbon dioxide out of the body. This occurs through passive diffusion. So let's review the respiratory system. Respiratory system's role is to regulate gas exchange. We inhale gas for cellular respiration, and then we exhale carbon dioxide waste. The respiratory system is made of the following structures, following the pathway of inhaling, breathing in. So that freshly breathed in air is going to hit the pharynx, then move into the larynx, down the windpipe, which is your trachea, into those two branching structures called bronchi, into the bronchioles until it reaches those little clusters called alveoli, which maximize surface area to make the most of gas exchange. And the respiratory system highly depends on and affects other organ systems. As we just talked about, it depends on the blood supply. And so that's highly connected into the cardiovascular system. So, next up naturally is the cardiovascular system. Let's begin with, why do we have a cardiovascular system? Well, hopefully our discussion in the respiratory system gave you that understanding. Our circulatory system is our transportation system in our body. All right, but it transports what then? It transports oxygen, as we just talked about, from cellular respiration, but it also transports nutrients. And the circulatory system will help to transport to remove waste. So, our cardiovascular circulation transports waste, hormones, nutrients, antibodies. The list is numerous. The cardiovascular system is a closed pump. It is made up of four chambers, two atria and two ventricles. And there are vessels in this cardiovascular system because remember, it is the transportation system. So there are vessels all throughout. There are arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, arteries away. Veins carry blood towards the heart, carries it back towards the heart. And then the capillaries are the smallest vessels in between, like we just talked about, that would surround the alveoli in your lungs. Let's talk about pulmonary circulation first, all right? Because there are two major types of circulation. We're going to start with pulmonary. Pulmonary, when we look at that word, what does that mean? Let's look at the root word pulm. Pulm refers to lung. So that means this circulation that's involved with the heart is also going to be involved with the lungs. This type of circulation, pulmonary circulation, is going to occur on the patient's right side of the body, right side of their heart. And the goal of this circulation is to get this blood rich in oxygen. Let's get it oxygenated. That means we're talking about blood that has been spent. It's delivered oxygen to the cells in your body. It's low on oxygen. So that means it's got to travel back up through the heart to be sent to the lungs to get rich on oxygen once more. That's why it's called pulmonary circulation. So here's the pathway in which it will flow through your heart. This oxygen depleted blood will come in through two different major veins, right? Because vein goes towards the heart. So we've got your superior vena cava and your inferior vena cava. Once it pools in through the vena cavas, it dumps into the patient's right atrium. It then passes through the tricuspid valve down into the right ventricle. And then your heart will contract and it will push that blood up through the pulmonary semilunar valve. Again, pulmonary because we're going to the lung here. Once it passes through the pulmonary semilunar valve, it will go into the pulmonary artery, where it then meets or gets into the lungs and gets rich on oxygen. So that's the pulmonary circulation. And this means that it is going to take oxygen poor blood, deliver it to the lung so that that blood can get rich in oxygen. All right, so let's pretend that happened. We've sent the blood to the lungs. It is rich in oxygen once more. Great. Now we have to get this blood distributed to the rest of the body, to the rest of the system. That is why this circulation type is called systemic. We've got blood rich in oxygen, deliver it back to the body, the system. So, of course, it's got to come back in through the heart so the heart can pump that blood through all the different vessels to meet that need. So, blood coming from the lungs will be delivered back to the heart through pulmonary veins. Veins go back toward the heart, and they're pulmonary because they're coming from the lungs. Notice how they're on the patient's right and left side because you have lung tissue on both sides of the body. So the blood comes in through the pulmonary veins and it pools into the patient's left atrium. Then it passes through the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid valve over here. Those words are interchangeable. Once it passes through that mitral or bicuspid valve, it pools down into the patient's left ventricle. So notice how systemic circulation all takes place on the patient's left side of their heart. Your heart contracts and it pushes that blood up through the aortic semilunar valve because guess where the next stop is? The aorta. And this major artery carries this blood that is rich in oxygen away from the patient's heart and delivers it to the body or to the system. That's systemic circulation. Blood is a major component of the cardiovascular system. So let's talk about the components that are found in your blood. You've got red blood cells, of course. The red blood cells contain hemoglobin. Hemoglobin's job helps bind to oxygen, which delivers oxygen then to cells for cellular respiration. Now, the red blood cells will return some carbon dioxide waste back to the lungs to be exhaled. Platelets is another major component of your blood. Platelets are in charge of clotting. They're clotting proteins and platelets. Plasma will contain nutrients, immune system proteins, hormones, and antibodies. And then white blood cells, finally, which fight off pathogens. So, four major components that make up your blood. And we can separate those through centrifuge. And this is how we gather plasma. So if any of you out there donate plasma, you donate blood, but then we separate it into the different components as you see here, which we're able to do based on different densities. All right, so let's review quick. The heart is four-chambered. It is a closed pump. It circulates blood for taking in nutrients and oxygen. It delivers clotting proteins and removes waste through plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So these are things that are always circulating in your blood. Pulmonary circulation delivers oxygen-depleted blood to the lungs so it can get rich in oxygen, whereas systemic circulation delivers that oxygen-rich blood back to the rest of the body. And because your heart and the cardiovascular system as a whole is a closed system, your blood circulates with a known pressure. And I'm going to go ahead and skip these last few bullet points because I did not cover that in this webinar for the sake of time now. Let's move into the digestive system. So the big question, of course, in entering into a new system here, why do we have a digestive system? Well, of course, the answer is to break down our food and our drink into all of those macromolecules that our body so desperately needs to thrive. So how does it do that? Well, digestion itself is where we take food and drink and we break them down into those smaller molecules, as I said, so that they can be absorbed into our bloodstream and used by our body for energy, growth, and repair. So when we talk about molecules, I'm talking about macromolecules. Think about proteins, lipids or fats, nucleic acids, carbohydrates. If we get those into their smaller components, it's easier to break down. That can be done in two different ways: mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Let's distinguish between the two. Mechanical digestion is simply physical breakdown. So I like to think back to like a basic physical science class when you learn the difference between a physical reaction or a property or a change and then a chemical change. So a physical change A mechanical change is just simply altering its form. So take food, for example. You take a big bite of a cheeseburger, you chew it up and you swallow it. All the pieces, they look different. They're smaller, right? But it's still a cheeseburger. You didn't change that substance. That's mechanical digestion. Chewing begins in the mouth, of course, but that whole process of breaking the food down into smaller pieces. It begins in the mouth, but it continues into the stomach. So the mouth is not the only structure to take your food and break it down into smaller pieces. It also occurs in the stomach with muscle contractions, and we call this peristalsis. The purpose of this is to increase surface area for food so that we can maximize digestion and that absorption of nutrients. Well, that is different than the other type of digestion that occurs, and that's chemical digestion. The chemical digestion is a chemical breakdown of food, and this changes the composition. This chemically alters the form. This begins in the mouth, believe it or not, using saliva. Saliva contains enzymes such as amylase and lipase. Amylase will break down starches. Lipase will break down lipids. And it breaks down these polymers into individual monomers. So the concept is the same here. We're breaking them down into smaller components so that they can be digested and absorbed. All right, let's talk more about structures beyond the mouth because we know when it comes to the digestive system, food and drink enters your mouth, but then, it exits through the anus and it's a whole pathway to get to that point. So, beginning with the mouth, we've got mechanical and chemical digestion. And we said we use saliva to help break down that food. Next up, though, as soon as you swallow that bite of food, it's going to enter a long tube that's going to travel alongside the trachea. But remember, our larynx is going to be a gatekeeper, and it's going to make sure that that food goes down into the esophagus and not the trachea. So, assuming that it went down the wrong pipe, your food is traveling through the esophagus, and its job is to simply carry the contents from your mouth down to the stomach. The stomach is a muscle that will further break down your food through muscle contractions, which we call peristalsis, and it uses a whole load of chemicals like hydrochloric acid to break down that food. After the stomach, the food will move into the small intestine. The small intestine will connect the stomach to the large intestine, and digestion of food will occur here. The main role is to absorb nutrients in the small intestine. So we're breaking down, we're churning that food in the stomach. We send it to the small intestine where, a little bit more digestion occurs. But the main role of the small intestine is to absorb those nutrients. Once nutrients have been absorbed for the most part, it will pass then into the large intestine. The large intestine's role is to absorb water. And finally, it reaches the rectum where we store that waste until you are ready to release it out of your body through bypassing through the anus. Now, again, another shout out to our on-demand videos. You can go into so much more detail about each one of these structures. For example, the parts of the stomach, the subdivisions of the small intestine, the subdivisions of the large intestine. Well, what about the accessory organs that are involved with the digestive system? All of that is included in our on-demand videos, which you can access by signing up for our free demo. Remember, you get it for 24 hours. And then be sure to check out our SurePass and SurePass Pro options. Let's review the digestive system. The digestive system breaks down and it absorbs nutrients and water for growth, repair, and energy production. Chemical and mechanical digestion occurs. Remember, mechanical digestion begins in the mouth, mastication, chewing, but it continues into the stomach through muscle contractions or peristalsis. Chemical digestion also happens in the mouth through enzymes in the saliva. And then it, of course, happens in the stomach when we talk about the secretion of acids and mucus to further break down our food and drink. And the food passes through the digestive system as follows: the mouth, into then the esophagus, down into the stomach, next up your small intestine, then into the large intestine. It's stored in the rectum until you are ready to relieve it from your body, and it will pass through the anus when it exits. All right, the nervous system is next. Why do we have a nervous system? The answer is simple here. For communication, our nervous system relays messages between brain and the rest of the body. So a brief overview of the nervous system. Our nervous system will include the brain, your spinal cord, and all of the nerves. The function of our nervous system is to help all parts of the body communicate with each other. This means that we are allowing cells in our body to receive information, determine where that information gets sent, and then allows our body to respond to that information. Though that information can be internal signals and it can be external signals interacting with things in our environment. All of this helps our body to maintain homeostasis. Think about all the different circumstances through which we put our body through, whether it's change in temperature, maybe it's exercise, sleeping, eating. What we put our body through, it's constantly working to adapt to the ever-changing world around us and within us. And it relies on that nervous system to be in constant communication with itself in order to maintain that. So it does this by two major systems. All right, so your nervous system can be broken down into two major parts, and you can see them really nicely here. The central nervous system, think central, middle, midline. The central nervous system, known as the CNS, is the central command system. This is the boss. This is what's telling the rest of your body what to do. It's made up of your brain and it's made up of your spinal cord. But then it's communicating with the peripheral nervous system, known as the PNS, and that's this other visual here. You can see peripheral nervous system, that's pretty much everything that surrounds the central nervous system. When I think of the term peripheral, I think most of us know that term when it's associated with vision, your peripheral vision. That's your outer parts that you're able to see around you. It's the same thing for the nervous system. The peripheral nervous system are the nerves throughout the body that surround or on the outer parts of the brain and the spinal cord. So these nerves, they are connected to the brain and the spinal cord, but they branch off from the brain and the spinal cord. And the job of the PNS, or the peripheral nervous system, is to carry these signals from the brain to the rest of the body and back again. So these are the nerves that are like your feelers, right? So you put your hand on a hot stove and the nerves in your hand are the first ones to sense that in your extremities, in that peripheral nervous system. And they're alerted, holy cow, that's hot. We got to get your hand off. We are not in homeostasis. You're about to lose your hand. So we send signals to the brain, which then tells your body to respond by contracting your muscles, pulling that hand away and off that hot stove. So they work in tandem together to keep you alive and thriving. And it does so through the basic structures of the nervous system known as the neurons. So the neurons are clusters of nerve cells that communicate with each other. They send information and they receive information. When we look at a neuron, there are different components, but they are all essential for the structure and function of the neuron itself. So let's start with the one labeled 1, that's just known as the cell body. So the cell body will contain the organelles and the nucleus of a neuron, all right? So that's the cell body here, containing the organelles and containing the neuron. But you see here around the cell body, you've got like tentacle-like things. And they're structured in that way for a very specific reason. These are called dendrites. And dendrites are those feelers around the cell body. They sense that information, they receive the information, and they carry that information toward the cell body. Then that information or the cell signal will travel along this longer tail portion of the neuron, labeled 3 here, and we call that the axon. So this entire structure here, this tail, is called an axon. And it's simply just taking the signal, the information, and carrying it away from the cell body and delivering it to the axon terminal. Again, notice how they're tentacles. They transmit information to other cells. But let's not forget about this structure that I've labeled 5 here. This is called the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath are these lighter green structures that surround the axon. The myelin sheath's job is to insulate and protect the axon. That means the axon must be pretty important if it has its own structure to surround it, insulate it, and protect it. That's because it is that important. Without an axon, you are not able to carry the signal or the information from one neuron or from one cell body to another. Some of our neurons in our body, guys, are huge, and we have to be able to carry that signal over long distances. And not only just carry the signal, but also keep its integrity as well. We don't want to mess up what that signal is. And since it has to travel along the length of that axon, we can't lose the integrity of the signal. We can't lose the signal itself. That means the axon has to be protected to ensure that we get that signal to the correct location. And again, that's the job of the myelin sheath, to protect that axon. Okay, so speaking of one cell communicating with another, we call this cell communication, right? One neuron communicating with another. They're sending and they're receiving information. So how does that work in a nutshell? We could go into the weeds on all of this. Fortunately for your TEAS exam, I don't think that you will need to go into that level of detail that I spend teaching my anatomy physiology class, but you can certainly get more detail in our on-demand videos than what I give you here. This is just an overview of cell communication. So first and foremost, the electrical signal is received by the dendrites. Remember, the dendrites surround the cell body. They are receiving, they're picking up a signal in that environment that surrounds this neuron. If that signal is strong enough, it travels down the axon to the axon terminals. And what I mean by if the signal is strong enough is this. Your body is constantly stimulated with signals all day, every day. And it has to prioritize what signal are we going to respond to first, right? Because it literally can lead to life or death. So if that signal is strong enough and it says, hey, I got to pay attention to this, we needed to act on it now, it will send that signal down the axon to the axon terminals so that that signal can be transmitted to the next neuron. So what does that look like? How does this signal, leave one neuron and jump to the next? Well, let's take a closer look, this bottom visual here. Your axon terminals have these chemical neurotransmitters within them at the ends. And these chemical neurotransmitters are going to be released. So that's what you're seeing here at these pink chemical packets. They're going to be released from the axon terminal and they will literally need to jump. They need to jump the gap is what we call it in the anatomy and science world. So they jump the gap and they reach that neighboring cell. And remember, these are going to be the dendrites of the next neuron. And once that signal is received by the neighboring cell, that signal is going to bind to the cell. And then that signal is just going to continue to be passed down the rest of that neuron and then jump the gap and go to the next neuron until finally the signal reaches its destination. Maybe that's the brain if it's receiving, or maybe the brain already received it and it's delivering it back to the body. And going back to our analogy of the hot hand on the stove, it tells your muscles and your tendons to work together around your bones to contract and move that hand off of that hot stove top. Let's review the nervous system. The nervous system is made up of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. It's divided between the central nervous system, which is composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which is going to be those branching nerves. A neuron, which is a nervous system cell, is made up of a cell body, dendrites, an axon, the axon terminal, and the myelin sheath, which surrounds and protects that axon. And neurons use electrical signals to communicate from one neuron to another. All right, this is our last section for today's webinar, and we are down to 10 minutes. I think we've timed this really, really well. So let's wrap up with the muscular system, and then stay tuned for more information that I'll share with you afterwards. So why do we have a muscular system? Essentially for body functions, and the list is numerous. So we have a muscular system to help us with movement, posture, generating heat, surface protection, and of course, circulation. So there are three major muscle types in your body. Smooth muscle, which you see here, is going to make up most of the digestive system. Cardiac muscle, which is unique. There's only one structure in your body, and that's your heart. That's why it's called cardiac muscle, because your heart is the only type of that muscle. And then finally, the skeletal muscle. So this is probably what we envision most likely when we talk about muscle and muscle movement and muscle contractions. We envision the skeletal muscles. So let's do a quick overview about the skeletal muscle then. There are over 700 named muscles in your body. And again, knowing those anatomical regions are going to help you remember which muscles are where. Where's their insertion point, for example? Muscles make up about 50% of your total body weight, and they absolutely work in groups for the most part to generate movement. So we name your muscles based on their location, based on their shape, and based on their size. The structure of the muscles, I think of almost like a hierarchy. So we'll talk about each one of these structures here in just a moment. Most muscle types are attached to bone, and where muscle attaches to bone, we call that a tendon. So what you're seeing here in our visual is that bone. We've got a tendon coming off of it, attaching to that major muscle group. But then branching off from that major muscle, we've got muscle fibers. Okay, so here's that hierarchy. We're starting with the most broad term, muscle. And then each muscle can be subdivided into your muscle fibers. And then your muscle fibers are going to be further broken down into myofibrils. Myofibrils are segmented into sarcomeres, and the sarcomere is the functional unit for contraction. This is like the equivalent of, a neuron, which makes up a nerve, right? It's the basic component of the nerve. Same thing with sarcomere and muscles. Sarcomere is the functional unit of the muscle. This is the functional unit for contraction. That means the sarcomere is going to contain actin, which are thin filaments, and myosin, known as thick filaments. And sarcomeres, when you look at them, see how it has this striped or striation? This is the arrangement of actin and myosin together. And I've got more detail on this on the next slide. But again, the sarcomere, this is where the muscle is going to contract and shorten for movement at this level. So what does that look like? How does contraction happen? And how does that have anything to do with this stuff called actin and myosin? Well, first and foremost, many nerves and muscle fibers work together in order for muscles to move, right? If nerves is the communication system, muscles don't know when to move, how to move, when to contract without being communicated with by the nerves. So they work together. And this system is fueled by ATP, energy, which is generated through cellular respiration. But the movement specifically occurs when myosin and actin bind together and they slide past one another. Okay, so in our visual here on the right, The top visual is when your muscles are relaxed. See here how actin in blue is on the outer portion of the myosin filaments, which are in the middle. They are unbound at this point. We've got actin on the outer parts and myosin in the middle. This is relaxed. But as soon as that nerve communicates with your muscle to contract, it's going to make actin and myosin, well, specifically actin, slide over top the myosin. Notice how myosin kind of stays in place. It's the actin that's going to become bound to the myosin. And they form what we call cross bridges. So when the muscles are contracted, the cross bridges are formed. That means actin and myosin are bound together. This is the muscles contracting. And then when they relax, they unbind. Those cross bridges break. So let's quickly review the muscle system. There are over 700 muscles. They're named based on their location, their size, and their shape. They generate movement by contracting and shortening. There are 3 types of muscle in your body: cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. And there are multiple levels of organization within your muscles. Remember, you have your muscle fascicle, the muscle fibers, myofibrils, and sarcomeres. And the sarcomere is the functional unit for muscle. This is where the actin and myosin can be seen for muscle contraction. All right, guys, that wraps up the content portion of this webinar. For our last few minutes together, I just want to let you know that tonight, this webinar is just the test prep. This is just front loading all of that content, stirring up stuff that you maybe already knew really well and reminding you of some areas that maybe you needed a little refresher on. Tomorrow at the same time, so 5 to 6 Central Time, I'll be back and we are going to do a practice test. So we're going to have 1 hour together where we just go through question after question after question that are aligned to your TEAS exam. And we're going to talk about why the questions are correct, why the questions are incorrect together. So we have a whole hour for that tomorrow. So mark your calendars. If you're not signed up already, make sure you do get signed up. And let's talk about, remember, some of the other things we offer at Archer in case some of you joined late and you didn't get to see all these goodies that we talked about at the start. So first and foremost, remember our free live webinars. You're joining us tonight. It's a freebie. We have more. I just told you I got one tomorrow night. And I know we had another science one earlier today, a biology one. We have webinars happening all the time in the math, in the English, in the reading, and the science categories. So make sure that you stay up to date on our calendars, get notifications for when we go live so that you can join us. If you miss a webinar or you're joining us for the first time tonight and you didn't even know we did this, how awesome. And you want to go to our previously recorded webinars, scan that QR code. You can access all of our free webinars that we've done in the past. Now, please remember, I meant don't forget about our free question bank and on-demand video for that 24-hour demo. So I'm going to go back over here to our website to show everybody. So you go to archerreview.com, you sign up with us, and you say, this is amazing. I want more. Go ahead and sign up for our free demo. You're going to get access to our question bank. You're going to get access to our on-demand videos for 24 hours, okay? So what does that look like? Well, in our QBank, you can go ahead and create a test, and you can really cater it to your needs. You can time your test to make your test most like the environment that you will take your TEAS test in. Again, it'll be timed. So that's a wonderful feature for you to mimic those conditions. So let's say I want to do timed and I want to go through questions that I haven't done yet. And then you click next. And let's say that you, oops. Why am I not able to? Because I don't need to scroll. All my options are right here. So let's say we go into Anatomy and Phys, which we just covered tonight. scroll to the sections covered in anatomy physiology, and let's say, oh, the cardiovascular system, when it comes to, all the parts in the flow of the blood, that could be something that I really need to quiz myself on. So you can just select that portion. But maybe you want to throw in a couple others that you felt, pretty good. I like the nervous system, but maybe there's just a couple in there. So add that too. You can cater it to your needs, is what I'm showing you. You can cater it to your needs. So you'll click create test, and it's all set up to, again, mimic that testing environment that you will encounter when taking your exam. Now, it keeps track of your success rate. So back on your dashboard, you can keep track of your statistics, questions that you've done well on, questions that you haven't done so well on, and questions that still have to be answered. So that's our Q bank. We have over 2,000 questions in that Q bank, and we are constantly revising it and improving it every single day. It's a wonderful feature for you guys to help you prepare. But then we also have our on-demand videos. And again, we can navigate through our on-demand videos and narrow down to or hone in on the needs of each individual learner. So again, science, we want to go to anatomy because we're fresh on that from tonight's webinar. And when you go to our on-demand videos, what we mean by on-demand is, truly, you can go to the different areas that work best for you. So in the cardiovascular system, let's say pulmonary circulation really, really well. Gosh, is that systemic though? It's when that blood leaves the lung, comes back to the heart, needs to go to the body. I get that mixed up. So I just want to go to that portion of the video. You can do that. You don't need to watch the beginning portions over and over and over again if you just need to practice systemic. So jump right to it. That portion of the video will start.
The goal of systemic circulation.
Now, to remind you guys, you're not going to see the video because that is a security measure to protect our content. But when you do sign up, you would obviously see myself actually teaching this content here. But then also in our on-demand videos, we've got handouts, we've got notes for you. Print those out or upload them onto an iPad, add to those notes as you're working your way through it. And then we also have cheat sheets. Cheat sheets take all of this essential learning from this topic and condenses it, summarizes it, and has wonderful visuals to go along with it. So that's our on-demand. So QBank and on-demand, you can have access for 24 hours for free. And when you realize this is awesome, these products are helping me and enriching my learning and testing me and making me feel really prepared. Don't forget that, let me scroll back here to the beginning, our packages that we offer. So you want to stick with us. 24 hours is not enough, Archer Review. And I hope you say that in the end because us and the pre-nursing team, we're really passionate educators, and we are here for you to help you prepare as best as you can in your pre-nursing journey. So the packages that we offer, Sure Pass, that's going to give you more access beyond the 24-hour demo period for QBank and on-demand videos. But then we also offer that Sure Pass Pro option. Again, QBank and on-demand videos are also available, but you will also get an hour of tutoring included with that price. So this will save you money in the long run versus doing just Sure Pass right away and realizing you needed a tutor later on. Just grab that free tutor hour with that price, and then you will have access to 3 of our wonderful tutors. So I'm going to scroll down here. We've got Tammy available for English and reading. We've got Dr. Shelley Harshberger with science and Brandon Kraft in math. So if you would like to sign up for any tutoring sessions with these 3 wonderful educators, go ahead and scan those QR codes to schedule a time with them. And finally, guys, don't forget about your TEAS webinar feedback survey. So please scan this QR code to just give me some feedback tonight about what you really enjoyed, what was helpful for you, and to also provide constructive criticism on what we can do differently to improve your experience. And I thank you guys all for joining me tonight. We got done just a couple minutes after 6 o'clock. That hour went by fast, but don't forget to catch me again tomorrow night at 5 o'clock Central Time. We're going to go over practice question after practice question over this content. I hope to see you all there. I'll hang around for another minute or so in case I see some questions in the chat. I hope everyone has a fantastic night. See you tomorrow night.